Have you ever thought about like all the talk about overpopulation?
Yeah.
The whole idea of the planet just getting more and more crowded. It's something we hear a lot about, right?
Yeah.
But what if I told you that the story is way more complex than that?
It really is. This idea of an exploding global population, it's kind of a paradox, actually, because while the number of people on Earth is still growing right now, the long-term trends suggest something completely different.
Hmm.
Like, we might actually see a significant slowdown, and in many places, even a decline. It's a really fascinating concept that we're going to delve into today.
Okay, so we're talking about the population explosion paradox, which is a pretty intriguing title.
Yeah, it definitely grabs your attention.
And we'll be diving deep into this based on the Kurzgesagt in a nutshell article called The Exploding Population Paradox.
Right.
We're going to go beyond just the surface level. We're going to look at the underlying trends, what's really happening, and what the future might actually hold.
Exactly. And to start unpacking this paradox, I think it's really helpful to take a historical perspective.
You agree?
You know, if you look back over the past 200 years, the population growth has been unlike anything we've ever seen before in human history. It's been massive.
Yeah, but for most of human history, things were pretty different.
Oh, yeah, completely
I
different.
mean, like for centuries, populations were relatively stable. High birth rates, sure, but unfortunately, those were matched by really high death rates.
Yeah.
So it kind of balanced out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Life expectancy was much shorter, infant mortality was high, disease was rampant. But then along came the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
And that really changed everything. It ushered in huge advancements in medicine, sanitation, and agriculture. And all of these improvements had a dramatic impact on death rates. They plummeted. People were living longer, healthier lives, and more children were surviving.
Okay, but birth rates didn't drop at the same time, did they?
No, not immediately. That's a really important point.
So you have this situation where fewer people are dying, but people are still having a lot of babies.
Precisely.
I mean, it seems pretty obvious that that would lead to a population increase.
Yeah, it's a pretty clear recipe for a significant population boom. And this imbalance is at the heart of the population growth we've seen over the past couple of centuries.
Okay, so now to make sense of where things are going, we need to understand this thing called the demographic transition model.
Right, exactly.
The article explains this model, which is a way of understanding these shifts in population over time. And there are 4 stages to it, right?
Yeah, there are 4 stages.
So stage 1, if I'm following correctly, is that initial period we were talking about, where you have high birth rates and high death rates.
Yeah, high birth rates and high death rates, resulting in a pretty stable population overall.
Got it. Then we move on to stage 2, which is where things start to change.
Right. So stage 2 coincides largely with the Industrial Revolution and the improvements that came with it. So we see death rates starting to fall dramatically because of advancements in healthcare and food production.
Right.
But birth rates, they remain high during this stage. So that's when you see those really rapid periods of population growth.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have fewer deaths,
Yeah.
but still lots of births, so up goes the population. So then what happens in stage 3?
Stage 3 is when birth rates finally start to decline.
Okay.
And this is often linked to societies becoming wealthier, to people having greater access to education, especially for women.
Yeah.
Also, we see more opportunities becoming available, opportunities beyond just raising a large family.
Right.
And another key factor in stage 3 is the availability and acceptance of contraception, which gives people more control over family planning.
Right. So it's not just circumstance, it's people actively choosing to have fewer children.
Exactly.
So what about stage 4? What characterizes that stage?
In stage 4, both birth rates and death rates are low, so they might roughly balance each other out, leading to a stabilized population. And in some cases, death rates might even slightly surpass birth rates, resulting in a very gradual population decline.
Okay, and the article makes the point that this model is really helpful for understanding where different countries are right now, in their own population journey. But it also gives us some clues about where the global population as a whole might be headed in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. The demographic transition model is a really powerful tool for making sense of these large-scale population trends.
Okay, now I get that birth rates are declining in many parts of the world, but we're still seeing pretty significant growth in the overall global population, right?
Yes, that's right. And that's where the idea of population momentum comes into play. It's a really crucial concept to grasp.
Okay, and I love the analogy that the article uses to explain this. They compare it to a huge freight train.
Yeah, it's a really vivid analogy.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure, so imagine this. You have a massive freight train moving at a high speed. Even if you slam on the brakes, it's going to take a long time and a long distance for that train to come to a complete stop.
Right.
That's because of the sheer weight and momentum it has built up.
Okay.
Population momentum works in a similar way. Even though birth rates are declining, especially in developing countries, there's this huge generation of young people entering their reproductive years. And even if they have fewer children on average than their parents, the sheer number of them means that the population keeps growing for a while.
So it's like we're still seeing the effects of past high birth rates playing out in the present. It's like this built-in growth.
Exactly. But the key takeaway is that this momentum won't last forever. It will eventually run its course.
Okay.
And projections suggest that by the end of the century, around the year 2100, the global population might actually stabilize, and it could even start to decline.
Wow. Okay, so that's quite different from the idea that's often thrown around about the population constantly exploding, right?
Yeah, it really challenges that common narrative.
And the article actually gives some concrete examples of countries where this is already happening, places that are already experiencing a population decrease.
Yeah, that's right. And what's really interesting is that several countries are already ahead of this global trend.
Mm.
Japan, South Korea, and Italy are all experiencing negative population growth,
Wow.
meaning their death rates are exceeding their birth rates.
And that brings up a whole other set of challenges, doesn't it? I mean, the article talks about some of the economic and social consequences that, like fewer workers having to support a larger elderly population. It really makes you think about how societies are going to adapt to these changes.
Yeah, it's a crucial point. Declining populations can lead to labor shortages. They can put a strain on social security and healthcare systems that weren't designed for this demographic shift, and it can potentially slow down economic growth. So yeah, it forces us to rethink how we structure our societies and how we adapt to these demographic changes.
Okay, so let's talk about the factors that are driving these declining birth rates. What are some of the main things the article points to?
Well, there are several interconnected factors at play. Economic factors are really significant.
Right.
As countries urbanize, the cost of raising children tends to go up, sometimes quite dramatically.
Yeah, it's expensive to have kids.
It is. And as women gain more access to education and professional opportunities, they often choose to have fewer children or delay starting families.
Hmm.
And the overall financial burden of having children in more developed economies is a major factor for many people.
So it's not just about economics, though, right? I mean, access to and attitudes toward contraception are also playing a role.
Oh, absolutely. Widespread access to effective contraception really empowers individuals to make informed choices about family planning. And alongside that, we see cultural shifts happening. In wealthier societies, there's often a change in societal norms around family size. Smaller families become more common, and people might prioritize their personal aspirations and career goals over having a large family.
So it seems like this population explosion paradox presents us with a bit of a double-edged sword globally.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I mean, we're facing different sets of challenges in different parts of the world.
Exactly. So in the short term, many developing regions are still experiencing rapid population growth, and that puts a lot of pressure on resources, infrastructure, and social services.
Right.
But in the long term, developed countries are increasingly dealing with the challenges of aging populations and potential labor shortages.
And that means we have to rethink some pretty fundamental things, right?
Yeah.
Like immigration policies, how we structure work, and how our social safety nets are designed.
Yeah, it really does. These demographic shifts raise important questions about how our societies are going to adapt and evolve in the coming decades. But the article does offer a more optimistic perspective.
Okay, that's good.
It emphasizes that we're not just powerless in the face of these trends. We have the knowledge and the tools to navigate these changes successfully.
Okay, so what are some of those tools? What does the article highlight as being key to dealing with this paradox?
The article specifically emphasizes the importance of education and gender equality. They're really crucial levers for positive change, especially when it comes to education for women. That's incredibly transformative.
Yeah.
It empowers women to make informed decisions not only about family size, but also about their lives overall.
Right.
And gender equality is really important for ensuring that women have opportunities beyond traditional roles. It allows them to participate fully in the economy, and it can also influence those societal norms around family size that we were talking about. So these aren't just nice to haves, they're really powerful drivers of demographic change.
So it seems like this deep dive has really shown us that this idea of a constantly exploding global population, it's not quite the full story. It's actually a much more nuanced picture with lots of factors at play.
Absolutely. I think the key takeaway here is that it's not just a simple upward curve.
Mm.
It's a complex demographic transition influenced by things like development, economic shifts, and changing social norms. And it requires a more thoughtful and nuanced understanding than we often get from those sensational headlines.
Yeah, it's not just about the numbers. It's about understanding the bigger picture and how all these different factors are connected.
Exactly. It's about looking at the historical context that has led to this point, understanding the demographic forces that are at work, and recognizing the underlying drivers of change. It's really a story about human progress and the evolution of our societies.
So, to sum it up, we've explored this population explosion paradox. We've looked at the historical patterns of population growth, we've talked about the demographic transition model, and we've examined this idea of population momentum. We've also seen that a decline in global population is a real possibility in the future. And we've delved into some of the economic, social, and cultural factors that are shaping these trends. But, this isn't just an abstract demographic phenomenon. It has very real and significant implications for all of us.
Absolutely. This affects pretty much every aspect of our life. The economy, our social systems, how we manage resources, and even global politics.
Exactly. So this idea of a giant wave of population, as the article describes it, a wave that built up momentum over time but is now starting to slow down, it's going to have a huge impact.
It will.
And it raises some really important questions. What do you think will be the biggest effects once this wave truly starts to recede? What kind of ripples will it create?
Hmm. That is a great question to think about. It's something we all need to consider as we move forward into the 21st century.
Yeah, because these demographic shifts are going to shape the world in profound ways. And I think this deep dive has given us all a really valuable and perhaps even a surprising new perspective on these global changes.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a really interesting discussion.
It has.